Hello and welcome to Carmichael Clan Radio, the official podcast of Clan Carmichael USA. Welcome back to episode 19 of Carmichael Clan Radio. I'm your host, Scott Carmichael. Today I'm excited to be joined by Coinneach MacLeod, better known as the Hebridean Baker. Since he first began posting his recipes on TikTok, Coinneach's life has been a flurry of activity, writing 2 international bestseller cookbooks, making appearances on television and in magazines, and traveling the world on book tours to meet his adoring fans. With a 3rd book set to be released on February 13th of 2024, I wanted to sit down with Coinneach to talk about the new book, but also about life in the Outer Hebrides and how he became the Hebridean Baker. This episode was so much fun to record, and I'm grateful to Coinneach for his willingness to share his time, recipes, and stories with us. He has also personally selected a recipe to be included in the November-December issue of the Eagle Gate, so be sure to be on the lookout for that in the coming months. If you don't already own the first 2 Hebridean Baker cookbooks, follow the links below to get yours. The upcoming book, The Hebridean Baker at Home, is also available for pre-order on Amazon. If you purchase it now, you'll receive the book at the lowest advertised price on Amazon between now and when the book is released, and you'll receive it in your mailbox on the very same day that it comes out. As always, a few things before we begin. The Stone Mountain Highland Games are less than a month away, and we're hoping to see you all there. The turnout is always really good at Stone Mountain, so make plans to attend if you can. If you haven't already, follow the link below to get your Carmichael Gathering 40th Anniversary commemorative print. We still have signed copies ready to ship, or you can also just pick one up at the tent at Stone Mountain and save on shipping. Either way, get yours today, for you or for a family member as an early Christmas gift. If you're interested in learning about becoming a member of Clan Carmichael USA, visit the Clan Carmichael USA website at the link below or visit www.clancarmichaelusa.com. If you've not become a member yet, we hope you'll consider joining and becoming part of one of the best clans today. And now, let's get to the show. Okay, so Coinneach MacLeod, welcome to Carmichael Clan Radio. I am really excited about having you on the show today, and I'm lucky that I was able to catch you before your schedule gets really busy. So thanks for joining me on the show today.
Oh, great to be here, Scott, and a delight for a MacLeod to be invited onto the Carmichael podcast. That's fantastic. I feel honored.
Is there historical beef there that I'm not aware of? I know the Armstrongs have a little beef. I'm not sure about the MacLeods.
No, I think we're pretty friendly, actually. I think obviously you're pretty far south, down in South Lanarkshire and the Inner Hebrides. So I think we kind of just left you to it. To be fair.
Oh, good. I'm glad that there's no quarrels there. So, and one of my best friends is an Armstrong too. So we're trying to redo the old history. but yeah, I am excited to have you on the show now. So. Your past 3 years have been exciting. I was looking, and on Amazon, the Hebridean Baker is listed as an international bestseller, that's pretty impressive. You got a 5-star rating, and you've got a 3rd book that's coming out in February that is available for pre-order now on Amazon. That is called The Hebridean Baker at Home, and we're going to get to that. But first, I wanted to back up, and I want you to take us to the start. Describe your childhood, describe growing up, and especially how you became the Hebridean Baker.
Well, I'm from the Isle of Lewis, born and raised. And for those maybe who don't know or where that is, the furthest north of the Outer Hebrides. And to put that into context in geography, I'm closer to the south coast of Iceland than the south coast of England. So, we're pretty far north. And it is a very special place. And I'm sure many of your listeners have visited the Outer Hebrides. But what I always say is we are proudly Scottish, but we're a wee bit different. Culturally, our landscape, and of course our language of Gaelic makes us quite unique compared to maybe what a lot of people think of as mainland Scotland. Even people in Scotland maybe don't know that much about the Outer Hebrides. So my upbringing was very traditional. My father was a fisherman up in the North Atlantic. My mother was a Harris tweed weaver, which is obviously one of our kind of traditional industries on the island. And I'm from a small village called Cromoar, which is the perfect marriage of our Scottish Gaelic heritage and our Viking Nordic heritage, because the Isle of Lewis was part of Norway for 400 years. And when Gaelic came to the island, we were part of Sudriar, the southern islands of Norway. And so, say today, Scott, say if you were speaking Gaelica to me, the Irish Gaelic, and I was speaking to you in Scottish Gaelic, we could sort of understand each other roughly. We would get the gist of what we were saying, but we have a lot of Old Norse in our Gaelic language. And Crow in my village, which only has 30 people in it, Crow is the Old Norse word for a cow. And Moar is the Gaelic for big. So I'm from Big Cow. The next village is Crowbake, which is wee cow. And I was always pretty proud growing up that the Vikings thought we had bigger cows than the next village. So I think that kind of sums up life on the island, you know?
That's funny. So are there lots of, and I guess you kind of alluded to this, but there are lots more Icelandic, Scandinavian parts in your culture than we would find in South Lanarkshire, for instance.
Yeah, there certainly is.
Yeah. Is that, so Scottish Gaelic, you mentioned that the words that you would use are, they originate in Old Norse. Is that true for all of Scottish Gaelic, even if you're speaking it lower, in the other parts of Scotland, or is that unique to the Isle of Lewis and the Northern Islands?
Well, actually, this was fascinating, Scott. I was down at the Isla Book Festival a couple of weeks ago, and I've got great friends living on Isla, and we were speaking in Gaelic, as you do, and I hadn't realized how different our Gaelic was. If you're on Isla or some of the kind of very southern Inner Hebrides, it's much closer to Irish Gaelic.
Okay.
Then there was definitely words that I was like, I don't know what that word. I'd never heard of that word. So there is real clear differences. I mean, Lewis Gaelic in itself, because we're the most northerly, has got some distinction to it. For example, even between the islands. So Scott, every morning, like a good Scotsman, I have porridge oats every morning for my breakfast. I hope you do too, even on your warm Tennessee days.
Yeah. I do sometimes.
But I'm glad to, yeah. Now, anywhere else in Gaelic-speaking Scotland, the word for porridge is brochan. But on Lewis, it's leech.
Okay.
And then another example is, of course, many of your listeners will know the Gaelic for whiskey is uisce behe, which means the water of life. But actually, uisce doesn't mean water in Lewis Gaelic, it means rain. So uisce behe means the rain of life, which doesn't work so well for us. So Gaelic is quite distinct between the different islands. We can 100% understand each other. But, it's definitely really fascinating hearing Isla Gaelic, which also is very closely related to Lismore Gaelic, which the McFarlanes are very synonymous with. So really interesting to see that even though there's only 60,000 Gaelic speakers in the world, but even those 60,000 can't all understand each other and everything we say.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic, actually. The Gaelic. Is there a push by the Scottish government or groups in Scotland to really have Gaelic taught more throughout Scotland?
Yeah, there's I think we have to continue to work very hard to make sure the language is not just a language that's going to be in museums or in books, but it's one that is used on a day-to-day basis, you know?
Sure.
And I think there's two parts to this. It's incumbent on all Gaelic speakers to not only speak in Gaelic when they can, if they meet somebody else, if they're at the supermarket or things like that, to speak in the language. But we're also like ambassadors for the language too, to promote it, to talk about it. And that's certainly the case. When I do my US book tours, we always talk about Gaelic. I always sing a Gaelic song as well. And it could be the first time somebody's heard the language, you know, and I want to inspire them. It's a beautiful language to hear, to speak in. It's a beautiful language to listen to music in as well. And there is a big push. One of the most positive things is Gaelic education. There's been a big change over the years. Now, every town and city in Scotland now has what's called Gaelic medium. That means that you can go to school and be fully taught from the language of Gaelic every other subject, from the age of 5 to the age of 17. And that's quite a significant change in Gaelic education. Actually, in the island of Lewis, you have to opt out of Gaelic education. So everybody's automatically rolled into Gaelic. Well, and I mean, you learn mathematics from Gaelic, you learn French from Gaelic, you learn history from Gaelic. You have to opt out to go into English language. That's a big shift. But I would probably say two of the other areas that have been big changes is we have our own TV channel now called BBC Alba being the Gaelic word for Scotland. And that is a fantastic channel of great television, lifestyle, news, sport, music that has made people just go, you know what? It doesn't matter what language it's in. The content is great. I want to watch it. And then even simple things like Duolingo, the fact that Gaelic is on Duolingo makes it really accessible and free to learn.
Yeah.
So I think there's been a real regeneration in the interest in the language. I hope I'm part of that. But I also feel that our music is part of that. And I think it means that people who love traditional Scottish music, say if it's Julie Fowlis or Cara Matheson from Capercaillie or Tide Lions, it doesn't really matter. It's just the music is beautiful. It happens to be in Gaelic. The storytelling is wonderful. So I always encourage, and actually in the back of all my cookbooks, I do a baking playlist of Gaelic songs to play while you've got a bun in the oven, basically.
That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. Well, those sound like all really good programs too. And I know I've tried to learn foreign language in the past, and the difficulty that I ran into was that I'm in a small town in the middle of Tennessee, and, it's hard to immerse yourself in any language. So it sounds like in Scotland, especially in the schools, that you can easily be immersed in that language. And that obviously is going to increase the chances of people learning it and speaking it.
For sure.
I'm a high school teacher in the daytime. And so that's something that's real close to my heart is education. And so I think that's really a neat opportunity for kids growing up to learn Gaelic also. I'm envious because I would love to learn. I saw that it was on Duolingo and was tempted to jump in, but I mean that it's so difficult too, being here, that there's hardly anywhere to immerse yourself in other than music. I was listening to your podcast, and I like that you've got the musical interludes kind of woven throughout, and it's really neat because they're in Gaelic, and it's just a neat opportunity to listen to it. We actually were lucky to have a professor from the University of Highlands and Islands that came on and spoke some Gaelic. Oh. It is a really beautiful language. It's really neat to listen to.
It is. Well, will I teach you some just now, Scott?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Let's do some easy stuff. Okay. Just so that when you leave the house today and you go to the supermarket, and you can say hello, how are you, to the lady or gentleman behind the cashier. So many people will know the word for welcome or hello because it's the same in Irish and in Gaelic, which is fáilte.
Okay. Fáilte.
So it's It's more in Gaelic because the accent is on the A. You more push on the A. So fáilte, Failte, fáilte.
Okay. Falche.
And then if you ask, how are you?
Mm-hmm.
You would say, Kimmer a how. Kimmer a how.
Kimmer a how. That
Scott,
last sound is getting me.
It's like you lived in the Outer Hebrides your whole life. So you would say, Fáilte, Kimmer a how. Hello, how are you? And then if you wanted to reply, you would say, Ha mi gu ma. Ha mi gu ma.
Ha mi gu ma.
And that's I am very well.
Okay.
So there you go. You've got the core of your first sentence all ready to go for today, Scott.
You're a kind teacher. So I'm sure I could work on those. Well, so like this story of you becoming the Hebridean Baker, is baking and cooking. Is that woven throughout the culture of the Outer Hebrides, or is that something that is that unique to your life, or is that something that everyone does in those areas?
Yeah, no, it's a very important part. I think food in many small communities or indigenous communities is a fundamental part of their storyline and their culture. And it's very much the same in the Outer Hebrides. We have great produce and always have had great produce. We have the best fish, the best meat, all these wonderful things. But we weren't that good at celebrating it. We weren't that good at showing it off. But simply, for me, I maybe came at a slightly different angle. I call myself a passionate home baker. My job with my cookbooks was never to make you into a Michelin star chef. That wasn't my goal. My goal was very much to make you love going to the kitchen and baking something hearty and wholesome. I always think that if your aunt was coming round to visit, you would take my cookbook out. That's when you would use my cookbook, something that your aunt would enjoy. And that's really how this all started. I actually, you will see a feature in my first book about my Aunt Belak. She's now 95. She was 93 at the time. And I was visiting her one day, and she was making probably what is our most classic cake, which in Gaelic is called a duff. On the mainland, they call it a clúti dumpling. It's a boiled fruit cake. Very simple, but really for us, just encapsulates everything Hebridean. And it happened to be her 65th wedding anniversary that day. And she said that she had been making this the same way for 80 years. I mean, isn't that just wonderful to think?
It is.
And she even made it the morning of her own wedding as her own wedding cake. So we were sitting there and she was telling me stories and the traditions of weddings in those days. And I thought to myself, I don't want people on my island to forget these stories, traditions, and recipes. Being honest, never imagining that this would resonate in the way it has now. The fact that across the world, I think now the videos that I created with these recipes and stories have been watched. I think it's now 28.5 million times, and I definitely know there's not 28.5 million people in the Outer Hebrides. That's for sure, Scott. So, and I just love the fact that I can go to I'll go on a book tour and I'm in Portland or Nashville or Charlotte, and people will say, "How's your Aunt Belak?"
That is neat
because they feel like they know her. And what I'm trying to do is bring people into our culture and my life to show an insight into a place that maybe they didn't know anything about. And for me, that's been a real joyous part of this experience.
Yeah, and I was thinking when you were talking about that, it's sort of, it was kind of post-pandemic, I guess, but it seemed like everyone was like these rich recipes that are warm and make you feel comfortable. And maybe that was something that people were missing after coming out of this pandemic. Maybe that's one of the reasons it resonated so well. I think also you do a great job at presenting these that, you have a personality that people really take to and enjoy. And, it seemed like it was this perfect answer for this this hole they had. They were missing something, and this really filled it. I watched you make. I think it was on the BBC or maybe ITV, but it was a recipe. You were outdoors, outside on the Isle of Lewis, and you were making a recipe. What was it? It had it wasn't raisins. It was mincemeat. Is that it?
Actually, I can picture exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I think it was a festive. I think it was a Christmas show I was doing.
Yeah, that is it.
Well, this comes to one of my favorite things is people always ask me what's the question I get asked the most on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I do get there's definitely some ingredients, not many, but there's some ingredients that don't translate particularly well to my North American friends, and one of those is mincemeat.
Yeah.
Because no animals were harmed in mincemeat. Mincemeat is made out of dried fruit, and I'm sure there was in time, hundreds of years ago, that there was some meat in it to bulk it up.
Mm-hmm.
But no, mincemeat is basically like a kind of festive kind of. Goodness, we put it in mince pies. We put it in it's kind of like a fruit mixture, very boozy. It's delicious. And so I was trying to make I think I was showing them how to make a real souped up raisin and oat cookie out of festive mincemeat.
Yeah, and it looked delicious too. When I was watching, I was like, I would love to try that right now. And especially because in the mincemeat, I think when you were making it, didn't you pour some? I think you put gin in it.
Do you know what? Do you know what it was, Scott? I remember now. I made a gin cocktail, but in the mincemeat, I put a dark Scottish rum.
That's what it was.
Spiced rum.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, that was a bit of a game changer moment for me. I've never changed my recipe since then.
Yeah.
The spiced rum in the mincemeat. Oh my goodness, spectacular.
That was the hook for me too. I saw it and I was like, yes, I will have one of those. Thank you. Seeing you put together the recipes, it sounded rich. It sounded really good. The weather has gotten cooler here with the start of autumn. And I was like, I'm watching this at the perfect time because I will have one and probably a second. What is it that you love most about baking? Is it giving things you bake? Is it the process? What is it about baking that you love?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First, we're pretty lucky where we kind of live in two places. I live on the Isle of Lewis in our kind of main home, but we also live. We have a little off-grid hut. We don't call them cabins in Scotland. We call them huts here. Just overlooking the island of Seal, very close. Again, we talked about Lismore a couple of times. Really, not only a few miles from Lismore.
Okay.
Where we're completely off grid, but we have a big old wood burning stove in our cabin. And one of my favorite things to do there is just pull out. I love old Scottish cookbooks or traditional cookbooks. There's one in particular called The Scots Kitchen. It was written in 1929 by a lady called F. Marion McNeill. And she was, her father was a minister based in Orkney. And she noted even then a concern that the traditions and recipes of Scotland were getting lost. So she traveled for months around Scotland, writing all the traditional recipes down. And I love that book, and it's given me a lot of inspiration. I would love to think that I'm trying to do something similar, but she did it in a very, eloquent way. And so I love taking all my cookbooks and just getting inspiration in that way. And the process itself, obviously now there's an added level to my process because I have to have cameras and all these things around me.
Right.
When I'm just baking for myself or the family or friends, it is a wonderful experience. As I said, I've always got some nice traditional Gaelic folk music on in the background. The process is really enjoyable. And I have, Scott, the sweetest tooth in the world. So the fact that at the end of this process, I've got something sweet to eat, it's just my dream.
Well, you must stay active because you seem to be, in good shape still. So you obviously run off or work off the effects of the sweet tooth. So well done on that.
Well, true. Yeah, I mean, there is when you live off grid, there's a lot of chopping wood. The only way to get to our cabin is by canoe. So it's a 20-minute canoe ride up the sound, the Clachan Sound, as they call it. So we work hard for our treats. That's for sure.
Yeah, but it makes them even better when you know that you're going to work that off. And it sounds like, even with McNeil and the Scottish kitchen being an elegant cultural preservation, it sounds, honestly, that's what I was thinking before you even said that you're doing the same thing. It may feel less elegant because it's newer, but it is the same thing. I mean, you're preserving these recipes and also these stories. I know your first book is, the Hebridean Baker, and it's wee stories from the Scottish Islands, or recipes and wee stories. So you're preserving these stories and these recipes. So, I mean, it does sound like you're doing that exact same thing. That is
it's a big part of the stories. The stories are a big part of it. I nearly, in many situations, have called it the book a kind of love story to the Hebrides that happens to have recipes in it. It means the world to me when people. I was recently at Grandfather Mountain Highland Games in North Carolina, and so many folk who had my first book who were coming to buy my second were like, we do love your recipes, but we're here for the stories. Yeah. And that means the world to me, actually, because that, as I said, the concept of a ceilidh for us is very important. And now many people think of a ceilidh as a ceilidh dance, but the traditions of ceilidh, the word ceilidh is in Gaelic a gathering. And traditionally a ceilidh would be, around the fire or around the stove of an evening where you would tell stories and sing Gaelic songs. And that to me is what my book is. It should feel like a ceilidh where you can, bake cake, learn some stories, find out about Gaelic music. And if I've portrayed that correctly, that's what people should get from these cookbooks.
That's interesting. That is really neat. And it must be, like I mentioned earlier, it seems like it was the perfect answer for whatever it was these people were looking for. And maybe that is it. It's a cultural experience. I think there's, in the United States, we're wild about our clans, more so than those in Scotland. And so there is a real effort to connect with Scotland, I think, from the United States. So maybe that's why people have taken to it so well.
Yeah, and I think, to be honest with you, I think maybe because I didn't start this thinking this was going to happen.
Right.
I really did think it just, even just for friends and family to preserve these stories. And so as it grew, I realized that what people were enjoying were actually just the things that I did anyway. I do sing in Gaelic, I do climb mountains, I do take our West Highland Terrier Shorus out in the canoe. I do bake, I do, all these things that people seem to absolutely love. And I remember one of the moments, you kind of think, how did this turn into something bigger? And I remember, you might know the women's magazine, Elle magazine in the US. You've heard of it. And they didn't contact me. They didn't tell me they were going to write this article. But the columnist basically I think she was either trying to come off social media or something happened. As she said, the only thing I'll miss about social media or not having social media is the Hebridean Baker. Yeah. And then she wrote her whole column about me. Now, I didn't know she had done it. And I just started to get a lot more followers, a lot more interest from America. And then somebody said, did you know you were in Elle magazine recently? And I think one of my favorite lines that she wrote in her article was she had never heard a Hebridean accent before, because it is quite different from maybe a traditional Scottish or Central Belt Scottish accent. So she was sort of kind of waxing lyrical about my voice, and she said, he sounds like what I imagine a piece of Scottish shortbread would sound like when it comes out of the oven. And I thought, okay, I love that.
That's funny. speaking of shortbread, what would you say that your favorite things to bake are? Are they shortbread cookies, or are they? I guess those are biscuits. What is shortbread
Yeah.
classified?
Shortbread is just shortbread, actually.
Okay,
It doesn't. We
okay,
don't need to have the word after it. We just call it shortbread. But you're right. That is
okay.
that kind of confusion. Look, I think shortbread is a non-negotiable. When you've got a Scottish cookbook coming out, you need to have the best shortbread recipe. And I literally, a bit like F. Marion McNeil, I searched north, south, east, and west. And I've got a few different shortbread recipes, but I think my favorite, there's one called a bride's bun, and it's actually from the island of Shetland, on in the Northern Isles. And what I love about so many Scottish recipes is that there are stories connected to them or
Hmm.
traditions connected to them. And so with a bride's bun, it's made by the mother of the bride on the day of her daughter's wedding. And when her daughter comes home from the wedding, rather than gifting her the shortbread, she picks it up and smashes it over her daughter's head. And if you're a guest at the wedding, it's good luck if you catch a piece of the shortbread before it hits the floor, and you put it under your pillow at night for like sweet dreams. And I love the fact that, I'm just picturing this mum, in the morning of one of the biggest days of her life, her daughter's wedding, going, right, I just need to make that shortbread to smash over my daughter's head for like that. Whoever thought of this, I don't know. But it's a really distinct shortbread. It's flavored with caraway seeds, which is a very Nordic, a very Scandinavian ingredient to use in recipes. So natural that Shetland should have that flavor in, being so close to
Hmm.
Norway. So yes, shortbread is very key. And I think what you'll find through the books is um, not only classic Scottish recipes or traditional Scottish recipes, but I love using Scottish flavors in maybe more classic recipes. So, and whiskey is a big part of that. I love using whiskey in my bakes, desserts, and cakes. Because the wonderful thing about whiskey is, depending on which whiskey you choose,
Hmm.
it's going to give you a different flavor combination. It's going to give you a different distinctness to the notes and tones of what you're doing. So be it whiskey, be it marmalade, all the wonderful things that make Scottish bakes just so wonderful. I
Hmm.
just love to celebrate them. And as I said, particularly if there is a story behind it as well. I just have this picture of somebody in, I don't know, I'm going to say Louisville, Kentucky, don't know why, who's baked one of my cakes. And as she comes to sit with her aunt, she tells the story about the bride's bun. Or there's another one I love. There's a dessert called a Scots flummery. And seemingly, Flora MacDonald was halfway through a Scots flummery when she was arrested for helping Bonnie Prince Charlie escape from Culloden. And I just imagine her going, oh, can I not just finish my dessert before I go to prison? So again, I would love people to share the stories as well as the bakes when they have friends coming to visit.
Yeah, that is important, and that I'm sure makes the recipes. Obviously, it makes them more interesting, but it makes the food more interesting. I think it probably when you eat the food, you're thinking about the story, especially the one that you said Scott's
Yeah.
Flummery. Is that right?
Flummery.
Flummery.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and it would be impossible to eat that without thinking of that, without thinking of that interrupted dessert.
Well, if it's good enough for Flora MacDonald, I think it's good enough for most folk.
Yeah. Is there a connection in Scotland with, so it seems like in the US, the only time people bake are around holidays. Is there a strong connection in Scotland with baking and holidays? Are there certain things that are baked on specific holidays?
Hmm.
What's that connection like there?
Yeah, it's a good question, and yes, there is, and even in the Hebrides, actually, I'm really pleased. In my new book, I was able to visit the island of Barra. Now, I'm from the most northerly, as I said, of the Outer Hebrides. Barra is one of the most southerly, with Vatersay, of the Outer Hebrides, and there is quite a difference between even the Outer Hebrides, and there's Barra and Uist have strong religious leanings to Catholicism compared to obviously the Protestant part of the Northern Isles. So they have a recipe called a Bonnoch Struain. It is the traditional recipe from Uist and Barra, and it's only made one day a year.
Mm-hmm.
And it's made on Michaelmas, the traditional day of the end of harvest in September. And I can't wait for you to see the photo because it's such an interesting looking bake. It's a scone baked in a treacle pancake. And I want you to even imagine what that looks like. But it's as I said, a fascinating storyline behind it. It's a very much a celebratory bake. And I asked my great friend Teresa, who's from Barra, to bake it for my book, and she appears in the book with the recipe. And she tried to, because the photo shoot was in May, and she was like, Coinneach, it's a bit like making a Christmas cake in June. It's really weird. She's like, it's such a strange experience making this in May, because I've only ever made it one day a year this September. And she said, she admitted that she was quite nervous about being in the book and representing, because she really represented the islands, because it's the bake. And so she said she must have made it like 43 times. Oh. And she kept like knocking on neighbors or friends' door going, would you like some Bonnoch Struain? And they were like, why are you making this in May? Like they couldn't get their heads around that she was making it in a different season. Yeah. So there is very much kind of seasonal celebratory dishes, and of course now there's this growth of celebration of Burns Night as well, and not just his wonderful poetry and song, which is so important. But actually now it's become synonymous with having this, the address to the haggis and what goes along with that. And even though, I'm technically from as far away in Scotland as Robbie Burns is from south, I'm from north. So our cultures are quite different. But I absolutely celebrate his poetry, his stories. And I was very lucky that last year, there is an event called the Royal National Mod, which is the Gaelic Song Contest, and I've performed it for or sung competitively at it for many years. Actually, I even sung at the Grandfather Mountain Mod, the Grandfather Mountain Song Contest, Gaelic Song Contest.
Did you win?
And I came second, but I'll tell you why I'm so happy to come second. I came second to a wonderful lady who I've met called Cynthia, who's from Virginia. She is a professional opera singer. Now, I don't mind coming second to a professional opera singer, but she has the most beautiful voice. She's getting taught Gaelic song by a wonderful singer from South Uist called Kathleen McInnes. And even though we're from, Virginia and the Outer Hebrides, we've become great friends through Gaelic music. And so at the Gaelic Song Contest last year in Perth, I sang a Robbie Burns song, which is quite a, he didn't write for it to be sung in Gaelic, but we got it specially arranged and translated for us. And it was the first time in 140 years of the contest that the song, which in Gaelic is called Erscan and Imacleod, which in English or in Scots is Auld Lang Syne, had been sung at the song contest. So, when I'm in the US, I'll often perform that song, and it's a beautiful song, and I think even more beautiful when it's sung in Gaelic.
I'm sure. I was thinking that same thing, that the song is pretty enough as it is. I'm sure that in Gaelic it's even better. So I won't put you on the spot and ask you to sing it here, but I will seek out a video of this at some point. So I'd love to hear it. So you mentioned these seasonal associations with cooking that are strong. Are there any specific recipes? Like I mentioned, autumn just began this past Saturday on the 23rd. Are there any recipes that come to mind when you think of autumn weather or autumn as a season, what are the recipes that are synonymous with autumn?
Well, to be honest with you, I think a big part for us, of course, coming from an island where you can't depend on the ferries or access to supermarkets, or food being in your supermarket. There's a lovely saying in Gaelic that what you harvest in the autumn will feed you through the winter. And so myself and my partner Peter were big foragers, and we started to grow an orchard of apple trees and pear trees and plum trees. But you will always find us foraging for brambles, for wild blackberries. And that for me is the taste of autumn in Scotland. And so they will be in everybody's kind of desserts, for these months. But I must admit, I did treat myself recently to what's called an uni. I don't know if you know what an uni is, Scott. It's OONI.
I've not heard of that.
This is a test. It's actually an amazing Scottish pizza oven company. Can you believe it?
Huh.
And I bought this. They're absolutely amazing. And I love making pizzas anyway, but seeing it's bramble season, I thought to myself, could I make a bramble pizza? Now, I can absolutely say this was one of the best things I've made this autumn already.
Really?
All I did was, again, because we can only get to our hut by canoe, so, we keep a lot of preserved things or tin things just in case we can't get, the supermarket. So there's always at the back of the cupboard, like a tin of Ambrosia Devon custard, like vanilla custard. And I thought to myself, could I make a sweet pizza? And this is the most, folks, my recipes are often a little bit more eloquent in this, but this was a taste sensation. All I did, I made a pizza base. Instead of having passata, I covered it in vanilla custard and then just went outside and picked wild blackberries, brambles. And oh my goodness, I think everything tastes better when you're in the wilds. If you're on an island or you got the wind rushing outside and it's pouring rain. And this was just the dessert of kings.
It does sound good. So this is what I learned about baking growing up, was to never adjust the recipes and to follow it very specifically. And it sounds like you're not afraid to get out and have some fun with these recipes and try new things.
100%.
I mean, like that's not something that I would have thought to do, is to make a bramble pizza.
Actually, one of the great things is about social media, and I've a really lovely community of followers on Instagram through Hebridean Baker. And I'll get folk writing to me saying, I made your savory oats, or I made your whiskey tiramisu, but I did something a little bit different. I added this, or I took something away. And I'm like, I love that folk have looked at it and gone, okay, I can make it better. Or they can notice that maybe they don't have an ingredient, and so they replace it and make it their own as well. So I think for me, as I said, I'm trying to make folk into passionate home bakers. And by doing that, you need to look in your store cupboard and what you have. And once you get used to the different combinations, like today, sometimes I just want cake. I look in the cupboard, and I was making a nice big pot of Scotch broth soup, and I had 2 carrots that I picked from the garden. And I thought, well, I'll make a carrot cake. And then I thought, well, I've got ginger, so could I make a carrot and ginger? And it just became it just kind of developed from there. And I haven't tried it yet, so I can't promise it's going to be good or not. But I think it's going to be delicious.
It doesn't sound bad.
That's my afternoon tea this afternoon.
The Scotch broth soup.
Well, Scotch broth is for dinner tonight.
Okay.
There's one thing, Scott, that Scottish people are excellent at, and that is making soup. We make great soup. If it's Scotch broth, if it's Cullen skink, if it's cockaleekie, pea and ham, we are experts in making hearty, wholesome soups.
I like hearty, wholesome soups. Do you feature any of those recipes in your books also, the soup recipes?
Yeah, all those recipes in the books, and actually, I even take them to another level. So, for example, with cockaleekie soup, a very well-known traditional soup, traditionally three ingredients, which is chicken, leeks, and prunes. That's the three main ingredients for a cockaleekie soup. But I actually thought to myself, well, I would love to try to make this into like a pie dish, like a kind of autumn, kind of like cozy pie dish.
Yeah.
And what I realized was the prunes just melted into the sauce, into this kind of leek sauce that I made, and just gave the sweetness to the chicken. Oh my goodness. Cockaleekie pie, everybody, needs to be added to your rotation. It's in my second book, and it's a complete winner. I love it. So even though a lot of the things are soups, I've then, I've got a Cullen skink tart, I've got cockaleekie pie, taking the wonderful flavors and then just making them even cozier, I guess, in a pie dish.
That's interesting that you do that, like using those kind of these foods to inspire you to make others that kind of have those same flavor profiles and such. That's really neat. So here's a question I have for you. Let's say, because I mentioned earlier before we started recording that my daughter loves to bake, the whiskey tiramisu. She makes tiramisu already, and I have a nice single malt Scotch collection, and I think the two of us can meld these things together to make something
Perfect.
great. Yeah.
Perfection.
What advice would you give to someone who's new to baking, though, and they want to learn to get into baking? Are there certain is there a certain mindset they need to come into it with? Are there certain any kind of special ingredients or certain flours they should look for, certain techniques? What advice would you give to someone who's just new to this and they want to get into baking or cooking?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is go directly to my cocktails chapter and have all my cocktails first. And then it doesn't matter what the cakes taste like. You'll just have a great night anyway. Once you get past the cocktails, what I would say is, no, there isn't anything particularly unique from an ingredients perspective. Maybe there's two things. If you want to have a Scottish kitchen in America, you need to have two things. The first is golden syrup, and the second is black treacle. Now, I go back to that question that people ask, what's the number one question you get asked on Instagram? And it's often, what's golden syrup? And golden syrup is the nectar of the gods. I can't explain it. It's not maple syrup. Mm-hmm. It's not corn syrup. It's its own just special thing. And if you went into every kitchen in Scotland, there would be golden syrup and black treacle. Black treacle is very close to molasses, so you can replace it with molasses. And these are very accessible. Just before we come on, Scott, we were talking about the amazing store called Scottish Gourmet USA, who are based in North Carolina, but they distribute online across the US, and they stock both these products, Lyle's golden syrup and Lyle's black treacle. So if you want to feel like you've got a Scottish kitchen, those two are non-negotiable. And then again, one thing which is very much celebrated as a Scottish thing is preserves and jams, and particularly marmalade. We call it Dundee marmalade. And if you can learn how to make marmalade, you're going to have some very happy friends. Particularly if you learn how to make my whiskey marmalade from my second book. So, so there are, if you're less confident with your oven, there's lots of things you can do that are very Scottish, but maybe don't need bakes. But when it comes to bakes, once you know how to make that classic shortbread, that's going to give you confidence just to grow your repertoire into other kind of traditional Scottish recipes. And again, the goal of the books is for you to just celebrate tradition, celebrate the stories that go along with the recipes. And even if it doesn't look the best, I'm not one of these that have these kind of like 7-tiered kind of like iced cakes. I always wonder who eats these things. Mine are small batch, small bakes, and things that are really accessible for you to achieve.
Well, and often the 7-layer cake doesn't taste as good as the small batch products anyway. So, and those are things you can actually make in your kitchen or small batch.
Excellent. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your cookbooks for a minute too. I know we've mentioned them a few times. So there's 2 that are already published. So the first one was the Hebridean Baker, and that was recipes and wee stories from the Scottish Islands. The second was the Hebridean Baker, My Scottish Island Kitchen. Does that one come with plenty of stories as well?
I think you'll be shocked to hear, Scott, that I love telling stories.
Yeah.
So yes,
Okay.
Yeah, each of my books has 75 recipes, and in 8 different chapters, themed around a flavor or a concept, and they're introduced by a story. I love the myths and legends of the Hebrides as well, and we're very fortunate that pretty much every hill, loch, stream, bridge has a monster, a giant, or a fairy living somewhere around there. So there's lots of stories of myths and legends in my book as well as just the kind of, as I said, just trying to give people an insight into our community and what it's like to either live here now or maybe in years past as well. Mm-hmm. Along with that, I just love the photography. I'm very lucky to have a great photographer. And Susie, she's actually also the head photographer for Gleneagles, which is the most glamorous 5-star hotel in Scotland. But yeah, she then comes to Hebrides to shoot my books as well. And she's definitely with my new one coming up as well. I just feel like she's really encapsulated everything I wanted to achieve in the book. As I said, it's called Hebridean Baker at Home, the new book. And so it's not just about my home, it's about visiting other people's homes and learning what they love to do in their kitchen and in their home. And so there's some great characters, like really great characters. And she's managed to capture the warmth of these people, their recipes and their stories in just this, in the beautiful photography that features in the book.
That's a really neat concept to feature other kitchens. It says Hebridean Baker at home. And so I assumed that was in your home, but that's really neat to feature other people's kitchens and those people themselves. So that comes out in February, correct?
Yeah, so it comes out 13th of February. And I'm really excited that I'm back on another North American tour. It's probably one of my favorite experiences out of everything I've done as the Hebridean Baker is being able to visit North America. And I've had now 3 sellout tours and just planning this one for February. I feel like I'm going to visit some cities I've been to before. Mm-hmm. I'm going to visit some new cities. And I'm so excited to come back. My trip I did in March this year, it just took me to some great places. We started in DC, we were up in Boston, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Fort Collins, Colorado, Chicago, and Toronto, and I said, I would love to tell you where we're going this year, but then, I would have to kill you, Scott.
Yeah,
it's so exclusive. It's top secret at the moment.
I understand.
But we're gonna announce it soon. And okay. It's a big tour. It's a big tour. I think it's 15 cities in February, then back again in July, and then back again for a month in September. So I just can't wait to visit and see the amazing folk around the US again.
Yeah, that will be busy. 15 cities in a month. It'll keep you, you'll be,
I wish a month. 15 cities is in 2.5 weweeks. I
oh, wow.
literally am in a
Gee.
different city every day.
Every day.
It's
Yeah,
like,
goodness.
it's a bit of an endurance, but it's worth it because everywhere I go, the people are just so amazing. And, there's just nothing better than, I just recently I was down in Greenville in South Carolina at a lovely bookshop called M. Judson. And I walked in and I was like, I was like, I've never been here, but I recognize you. And she was like, yeah, I came to your event in DC, but I wanted to come down to see you again, or someone in Charlotte. And you're thinking, some of these people have traveled for 5, 10, 15 hours to come, and that's very humbling. It really is. And so I make sure that everybody has the best and most fun night ever when they come to my events. So if I'm coming to your town or city, please join us. You'll have a great time.
Well, I'm sure you'll find one nearby, and I'll be watching to see when that list is revealed, what the nearest one will be. And I'll get there. I'll definitely make my way to the closest city. There's lots of Scots in the southeast of the United States, lots of Scottish descendants. And so I'm sure you'll find one close by, and I'll be watching.
Hope so.
That's funny. I keep thinking when you're talking about this, I'm like, I'm sure you could have never predicted 5 years ago that you would be touring the U.S., 15 cities in 2.5 weeks. I'm sure it's all real surreal to you, isn't it?
I actually, it's impossible to put it into context what's happening, what happened over the past few years. And all from, as I said, genuinely sitting down with my aunt, telling stories and hoping that other people might enjoy them, to now, 2 weeks ago, I was filming a TV show with 2 of the hobbits from Lord of the Rings, Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan. They came to the Outer Hebrides to cook with them, and all these things. Like it just really makes me smile. It makes me smile that not only are people enjoying my stories and my recipes, but that they're learning about the Outer Hebrides. They're learning about our culture. That a huge upsurgence of people learning the language of Gaelic. And even just a couple of weeks ago, I'd gone down to Islay, the Islay Book Festival, and I was heading home, and I was on the ferry. It's actually a long way from leaving my house on the Isle of Lewis to get into the Islay Book Festival. Was just over 13 hours. So it's a long way, even though we're on the Hebrides, it's 2 ferry journeys in a long way. Anyway, I was on the way back, and I was sitting on the ferry, and this English lady tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, are you the Hebridean Baker? And I was like, yes, I am. And she said, you're the reason why I'm on this ferry. I've been watching your videos and buying your books for the last couple of years, and I've dreamed. She was a mature lady, and she was like, I never thought I would be able to travel again, but I just made it my mission that I was going to get to the Hebrides, and never thought that I'd be sitting beside you on the ferry as we arrived. And that meant the world to me, that somebody that the Hebrides became aspirational for somebody to come to visit to. And she wrote to me afterwards and said that she just had the most magical experience and was able to see it in a different way. She had seen it through my books, she had seen it through my stories and videos, but to be able to stand in a 5,000-year-old stone circle at the Coinneach Stones, to be able to, she stayed in a traditional thatched stone house at Gavin in Blackhouse Village. She hiked up to the lighthouse, the most northerly point of the Outer Hebrides. She tried Stornoway black pudding. She did all the things. She went down to the distillery, the Harris distillery in Tarbert. And she said, all the things that I've watched you do, I was able to do. And she said it was magical.
Well, and the whole story, too, just makes me think of how many times I've heard someone say, I should write a book about that. These conversations we have, the teachers in the hallway, I should write a book about that. And it just makes me think, just do it. you had this conversation with your aunt sitting around, and you started turning that into something, recording the stories, and people wanted to read it. They wanted more of it. So I think it's an amazing story, and I'm honestly really excited to follow your success and to see, to see where all this goes. And you're doing something, preserving the culture of the Outer Hebrides in Scotland through the language, through the recipes and the stories. And so, you're doing what you love, what you're passionate about, but you're also giving back to your culture. It's really a neat story. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see where all it goes. And I'm excited to find you when you come back to the U.S. I'll definitely, bring books and have you sign some books for me, if you will. So where can people, learn more about you and follow your work? I know TikTok is one of the big ones. That kind of where it kind of all blew up,
started
I guess.
There. Maybe a bit more accessible for folk. Instagram as well, Hebridean Baker. So I particularly enjoy Instagram because I can share like photography and videos and all those things. So definitely check that out. Again, some people come for the recipes, some people come for the stories, some people come for the beautiful scenery. But the other 98% come for Seamus, the West Highland Terrier, who is the global star. I get in the way with my recipes, but Seamus is really, really the star of everything. I love the fact that I can spend 8 hours creating a video, making this beautiful cake. And people will like it and comment. Then the next day I'll just post a photo of Seamus and I'll get like 10 times
That's funny.
the number of likes. So I'm sure people are kind of like flicking through going, yeah, recipe. Yeah. Oh, there's Seamus.
That's funny. Well, before I let you go too, give me maybe 2 recipes we need to seek out as we go into October, November, December, and I'll try to bring one of these to our listeners.
Well, why don't I do it this way?
Okay.
Maybe if the question was, if I was cooking you dinner from your book, what's the 3 courses that I would love to have? So I think 100% I would start with Cullen skink. Cullen skink, yes, an odd name, but a wonderful, hearty, smoked haddock soup from the town of Cullen in Aberdeenshire. And it's kind of, as it's I know a smoked haddock isn't the most common fish to smoke in the US. So you can find other smoked whitefish if smoked haddock isn't available. But smoked haddock is just one of these warming, lovely starts to any meal. So I'd be asking you to make me Cullen skink soup to start, Scott. Mm-hmm. And then I chose to have a recipe for vegetarian haggis in my cookbook. There's a couple of reasons why, but the main reason is to start a recipe in a book, rip the lungs out of a sheep as the first part of the method isn't the most accessible start to a recipe. So I thought, no, I'll make it vegetarian, and I love vegetarian haggis. It's delicious, and of course you still have it with the classic neeps and tatties, mm-hmm. Turnip, potato. So a hearty bowl of vegetarian haggis with neeps and tatties for my main meal, please, Scott.
Okay.
And then for dessert, as much as I would love to try your version of the whiskey tiramisu, because it is spectacular, but it would have to be my Aunt Bellac's clouty dumpling. And I would serve that with a delicious vanilla custard. And I would be the happiest man in the world. Definitely the happiest man in Tennessee if you serve me that for dinner at your home, Scott.
Well, I've got all 3 written down, so I know what to make. If you make a surprise visit in Tennessee, I will keep this and I will do my best. I'm not known for my cooking skills, but I'm willing to give it a try. So, well, I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun talking to you, and I'm excited that you're coming back to the United States in February, or after your book comes out in February, and I will definitely catch up with you then.
Amazing.
And looking forward to meeting you in person.
Thanks, Scott. It's been an absolute pleasure. And as I said, thank you for inviting this MacLeod to the Carmichael family, just for one night only.
You're always welcome. You're always welcome. Thanks again to Coinneach MacLeod for joining me on today's show. Coinneach was nice enough to make room for the show right before he headed out to do some book events, and we're thankful for him for being so gracious with his time. Continue to help Carmichael Clan Radio grow and reach new listeners by sharing the episodes and supporting the show. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or subscribe to the Clan Carmichael USA Substack page at clancarmichael.substack.com. By subscribing to the Substack page, each time I release a new episode or essay, you'll find it right in your inbox. So be sure to get signed up to receive all the latest from Clan Carmichael. And finally, if you like what we're doing, please leave a 5-star rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or leave some feedback in the comments section on Substack. Your reviews help to promote the show and make it easier for others to find us. And it lets me know that you're enjoying the show. So until next time, toujours prêt. See you soon.